Hi, everyone. Today on the Writing Gym podcast, we're talking with Mike Bender, creator of Awkward Family Photos. At the end of the episode, don't forget to download your free cheat sheet on how to build your brand at www.writing-gym.com/awkward.
Welcome to the Writing Gym podcast. We're here to pump up your writing. And now your host, Andy Brixey, personal trainer at the Writing Gym.
Hi, I'm Andy, personal trainer at the Writing Gym. Welcome to Tricep Dips with Mike Bender. I'm excited to introduce you to this week's guest, but first, a word from our sponsor, the Writing Gym. You know, you could break free from feeling not good enough. You could write freely and achieve your publishing dreams. You're tired of rejection and lying awake till 2 a.m. wondering how you could fix your manuscript and publish. Wallowing in self-doubt is not getting you closer to your writing goals. You need real standards, real support, and real change. Are you ready to transform your writing and take it from the slush pile to publishable? We are currently accepting select writers to achieve their publishing dreams in the Writing Gym. Visit www.writing-gym.com to apply. And now I'd like to introduce you to our resident writing coach, the gal who helps you pump your writing into shape in the Writing Gym. Welcome back to the Writing Gym podcast, Annalisa Parent.
Thank you, Andy. I'm so glad to be with you here again.
Listen, everyone, we all know that Annalisa is pretty special. And even if she is an amazing writing coach, she has had her own share of very awkward moments. She traveled to a very specific village in France looking for the ancestral home of her family before they left for Canada in the 1600s. She got all the way there only to discover it was the totally wrong village. I'm sure there's an interesting story with this moment, right, Annalisa?
Oh, yeah. I mean, have you ever tried to read 17th century priest cursive? I mean, it's tough. But we had a nice time in the village that is not where my family came from, and it was beautiful. And someday I'll find the real village that the parent family originated from.
So check out the details of today's Writing Gym quirk in the show notes at www.writing-gym.com/awkward. And speaking of awkward, let's welcome this week's guest, the co-founder of Awkward & Sons Fine Family Curiosities. You all probably know him as a screenwriter, but mostly from Awkward Family Photos, the website, the books, the global-wide phenomenon. He has 7 books published now, including a coloring book and a children's book of photos that focuses on how growing up is awkward for everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, Mike.
Thank you. I've never heard it rattled off quite that way. No one's ever talked about Awkward & Sons first. It's very little known store for Awkward Family Photos.
Oh, I'm glad that I tracked it down. So can you tell us, how did the idea for Awkward Family Photos come up? Like how did that get born?
Yeah, well, very fittingly it started with my mother. I went home one weekend, this is back in 2009, and she was putting up a photo. Couldn't understand why she was memorializing this particular photo, but she was putting it up in the house, and I think that I was a writer at the time, and it got me thinking, and I sat down with my writing partner, I think that following week, told him about the fact that my mom was putting up this photo, and he said, my house is literally full of these kinds of photos. And so we just, over this lunch, realized, if we have them, everybody must have them. And so it kind of dawned on us that what my mom was doing was secretly kind of a genius idea. And we thought, let's throw up a website. Again, it's 2009. We got a cheap WordPress website, threw up some of our own photos, got some friends to contribute, and maybe 14, 15 photos. And I had another friend of mine who worked for a radio station in Rhode Island, and it was a Clear Channel radio station. At the time, Clear Channel was everywhere. And so one of the radio station websites picked it up, and then another and another and another. And within the span of about a week, we had over 1 million, impressions on the website. And this is, let me just preface that by saying that we had absolutely no idea how to put a website together, absolutely no idea how to maintain any level of traffic whatsoever. So when I say it was a mess, it was a mess. And so we had all this traffic coming in, and I'd like to say that we were sitting back and high-fiving each other. But the truth is we were freaking out that entire time because we had the traffic. We didn't know how to keep the site up and running.
Wow, that is amazing.
Yeah.
So how did that transition from having this small collection of photos to then becoming the phenomenon that it is today with books and cards and etc.?
Well, it was a process. I think like people sometimes think it was an overnight thing, and it really wasn't. I like to think we kind of tripped our way into this whole thing, one trip after another. But basically, we launched the website. The website started getting a lot of traffic, and then we started getting a lot of submissions, and these submissions were coming in from all over the world. And so at a certain point, maybe let's say 3-4 months after we launched, we started to hear from publishers like Random House and HarperCollins, and people were writing us and saying, you guys thought about doing the book. And this was really at the beginning of kind of like the websites turning into books phase or phenomenon or whatever you want to call it. Now there's so much of it that I think it's hard to keep track of what's what. But at that time, there really wasn't. So publishers were getting interested in this space. So they reached out to us and we said, great, sure, let's do a book. How the hell do we do that? We realized at that point we've got to license these images. You can't just take people's images and throw them in a book, right? So that was an education. We started to license the images from the families, and then from there we were able to do books, we were able to do greeting cards, and then the licensing business sort of slowly grew out of the book. The book was the first thing, and that put us on the map. The first book became a New York Times bestseller, and I think that really legitimized the brand, at least to other licensors, licensees. I always forget what it is. But the point is that was kind of the jumping off point. And it also made us get more serious about the website itself and saying like, okay, we got to actually, this thing has to work, right? Because now we actually have a book out there. But the truth is we never really know what we're doing. That's the real truth.
So confessional, like, did your mom feel like she'd been sold down the river with her awkward family photo, or was she on board?
Well, the first people I showed the website to before it launched was my parents. And I thought that they would take some pride or ownership in it. And my father, I keep saying this to him, and now he hates when I say this, but he said that it was a terrible idea. And my mother was like, I don't get it. And it was just a lot of doubt and confusion. So when it launched, I think they were just shocked. They were just shocked that they were kind of really, really shocked. Now they're like cheerleaders, and my mom is always out there trying to sell the books. But no, I think they were just so blindsided by the fact that they thought this was such a bad idea, and then it actually worked to some degree.
Wow, I love that. So you're in a co-author situation. Tell us how that works and how the two of you work together on this project.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because we were writing partners first, right? Which I think prepared us actually really well for what happened because. Hold on one second. I'm going to just shut down my messages so that we can get little dings in there. Okay. We were writing partners first. And so I think when you're writing partners, you really, really there has to be a real trust there between the people. And if there isn't, I don't think you can be writing partners if you don't trust your writing partner. So that going into a business was a really valuable asset between us, and that we just trust each other implicitly. And we also grew up together. I should mention that we went to high school together, so we've known each other since we were in our most awkward stage, and so that helped a lot too. And I think that we've always been just very open with each other about if we have doubts about things that we're doing, and one person will help the other. We also have different skills. We bring different things to the table. So we're good at kind of dividing and conquering, which I think is important, especially with a business like this, because truthfully, there's people, and it's always so funny to me, people ask me like, so what, is this like a full-time job? And the truth is, it's more than a full-time job. It's crazy how many pieces there are to not just a website, but trying to do the books and cards, all these things, keeping all these plates in the air. It's so much work. And we have to wear a lot of hats. So if we don't trust each other, if we aren't able to kind of delegate and do different things, then you kind of crash and burn.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I understand correctly, Mike, your latest project is a kid's book. Is that right?
Yes, and maybe the thing I'm most proud of. It's a kid's book. It's called Everything is Awkward. We've long wanted to do a project for kids, just for kids, because we've seen how kids react to the photos. Even the first book, we have a museum exhibition which is touring the country, so we see kids coming to the exhibition. And they have a different perspective. I mean, they're not remembering the nostalgia like some of us are of the 80s and 90s, or even earlier if you're a grandparent. But in the kids' cases, they're just finding the sort of the funny in these photos. And so we wanted to take the photos and create a book that also had a positive message for kids. And it was pretty easy to come to, which has been our message from the beginning, which is that we're all awkward and we should celebrate that. And for kids, it's about realizing that life is imperfect and things are going to happen, and you're going to fall, and you're going to get, the fishing line caught in your hair, and all these things are going to happen, and just embrace it, because that's life, and it's a lot easier when you just embrace it.
What a beautiful message to share with the world. You and I were kind of catching up before we started recording. We went to college together, which, I mean, is really, frankly, a pretty awkward time of life. So I think this is a really important thing to embrace in ourselves, to say, we all try to be the cool kid, but in the end, we're all pretty dang awkward.
We are, and some people aren't able to confront their own awkwardness, but I think we all are. We've all had awkward moments, especially with our families, and so it is a great thing for kids. And I've had the chance to read it for big groups of kids. Most recently, I read it for almost 300 kids.
Wow.
And it was just so much fun, because you put the photos up and the kids just lose their minds. So I don't know why I'm still getting dings. Sorry, guys.
No worries.
Okay.
So
go ahead.
No, I'm curious about if this has ever happened that a photographer has come back and said, that was a really good photo, or, if you've had any feedback from the people who set up these shots.
Wow, that's a good question. So we have. Some photographers are really great about it. They totally get it. We have photographers that actually, to this day, keep sending us photos. Saying like, look at this awkward photo I took, and many of them we incorporate into our exhibition or on site or in the books. There are photographers who are a little bit cagier about it, and do take offense, thinking that we're saying that their photography is awkward. And we try to explain to people that the site isn't about awkwardphotographers.com. The site is about capturing the awkward moments of family. And the photographers often are just the people that are documenting this awkwardness. So we have nothing against photographers. We love the photographers. And I think the ones that have a sense of humor about it really get what we're doing. And a lot of times, we'll get an email or a message from a photographer who will give us some more insight into, the photo and how it was taken. My favorite is the photo on the cover of our first book. It's like
I was going to ask about that one.
Well, that's a classic, but it's a family piled on top of each other, all in denim. And I went to interview that photographer because we were doing a short film with that family. And she was amazing. She was like in her 70s. She basically said to me, she didn't see what was awkward about it. She said, it's still one of my most popular positions. And she defended it. She said, "This is a great." And I said, "You know what? It is great. It is amazing. I mean, you literally got a family to just pile on top of each other. It's incredible. I love it."
Yeah, that's really interesting. And if I understand correctly, you've started a podcast to kind of get into the background and the stories of how these photos came about. What has that experience been like?
Well, it's been great. It's so much fun. I'm doing the podcast. First of all, I'm doing it with my wife, which we've never worked together. So this is the first time that we've ever worked together. And she is infinitely more qualified to be doing a podcast than I am. She was a journalist for many, many years. And so we talked about actually coming together to work on this, because I thought she's much better at interviewing than I am. But I can bring in the piece of these people, these stories that we've gotten over the last, 8 years. We've gotten all these incredible stories, and a lot of these photos, you wouldn't even imagine kind of the stories and how deep some of these, the stories behind these photos go. And so we wanted to do a podcast where we could really sit down and go deeper, because the website's really just snapshots of what's going on in the photo. We wanted a chance to really sit down, talk to these people, get their stories, and also just understand who they are, so that maybe someone who's listening, is going to relate to their story or whatever place they were at the time they took the photo.
Yeah. So is there a common thread in the stories that you hear, as far as, did people feel awkward when it happened? Did it just feel authentic? Was it spontaneous? What kinds of things do you hear as a trend around those photos?
I think most often it's that people were oblivious to it. And actually that's usually what we're looking for. We usually want photos and stories where people were oblivious at the time. And then in retrospect, as they get older, they look back and say, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe, I took that photo. It looks like I'm humping the family dog." So you don't always know, when you take the photo. I think maybe we're more self-aware now because we can see the photos on the camera. And sometimes people ask me that you get less awkward photos now, but the truth is, no, people still have trouble recognizing kind of their own awkwardness, I think, at times. And so it hasn't changed the volume of photos that have come in.
That's super, super interesting.
Mike, I wanted to ask you a little bit, like you talked about how when everything started, it was just kind of this windfall of all this stuff. And one thing that we talk a lot about with like our authors and things that I think that your insight would be really helpful is like building a platform. And, you guys came up with this great idea of, here's this website with these photos on it. And then all of this other stuff stemmed from that. So how did you kind of deal with that, with figuring out exactly how you were going to build this business and what you wanted to come out of it?
Yeah. Well, like I said earlier, a lot of it was just sort of stumbling our way through it. I wish I could say that we had some elegant business plan from the beginning where we mapped it all out and we said, this is what we're going to do. I think we knew, the most important conversation we ever had was, what is the tone of this brand website? What is the tone? What are we trying to say? Because we felt like if we just put something out there that was mean-spirited or that felt snarky, that A, people weren't going to send in their photos, but B, it just wasn't going to last. And so I still think the most important conversation we ever had was that this had to be about celebrating awkwardness and creating something that people could relate to and say, "Oh, we've all been there." So that spirit kind of runs throughout everything we do. And when we started the website and then the book came to us, I think the thought was, okay, this feels organic to our mission. We're going to create a book that feels like a big family album. Then it went to greeting cards, which again felt, okay, that feels really organic because these photos are greeting cards in and of themselves. There's something about these photos where you just are laughing or relating. And so that was an easy jump. So basically, I guess what I'm getting at is that everything we've done that's worked has felt really just connected and organic to the brand. And I think people can sense that. I think if you're trying to force stuff, and and oftentimes that happens, people can sense that too. And that, that hurts. So that, I believe me, we made mistakes. We've maybe ventured into things where it didn't feel organic and it didn't work. I was like the museum exhibition, like aside from the children's book, probably my second favorite thing that we've really ever been a part of, because first of all, when we mentioned the idea of doing it to those in our circle, people again said, "You're crazy. You're never going to get into museums." And whenever we hear that, that's always like, "Okay, that's good. We should pursue this, because if they're saying we're crazy, then we're on the right path." But it took us a while. It took us years to figure it out. But we got one museum to say, "All right, I'll give this a shot." It was actually like this semi-dying museum in Santa Monica that needed something fresh. They had been doing like an exhibition on crocheting. I mean, literally that was like the exhibition before us. And so when we had the opportunity, and the exhibition got a lot of press, and people showed up, and that then of course you start hearing from other museums, because they say, "Oh, wait a minute, there's they're getting attendance," and that's a big thing in that world. So so it was great, and just to see that people were walking through and interacting with the photos, because I don't get to see on a daily basis when people are browsing the website. I don't get to see their reactions. Unfortunately, I go on Facebook and you see a lot of snarky comments, and I don't love the Facebook culture as it relates to comments. To be honest with you, I don't like comments in general. Sometimes people say nice things, but for the most part, it's a lot of like negativity, and I just don't love that. So when you see people in the museum, they're reacting right there to all the photos all laid out in front of them, and it's just really cool to see people laughing and telling stories about their own families. It's just a cool experience.
Wow. I love that. And, Mike, you've got a lot of experience in multiple genres. So you've worked with a lot of things at this point. Maybe some you haven't even told us. We don't know. So we always ask, as part of our interview, for all of the people who are listening, who are aspiring writers, who would love to publish a book, never mind have the success that you've had in multiple genres and in screenwriting. So what is one piece of advice that you would give to aspiring writers so that they can get to where you are?
Well, I think that ultimately it's about really being kind of comfortable with yourself and understanding what you connect to, because again, it's almost like what we were just talking about with how the brand and the business grew, which is it has to be authentic. And so I just think that's the most important thing for any writer, is authenticity in whatever you're writing. And it could be anything. I mean, you can write anything and do it well if it's authentic. So to me, that's probably the most important thing.
Yeah, I love that. That's really solid advice. And certainly, it takes a certain amount of time in life to become comfortable in your skin. And I think as a writer, it takes a certain amount of time to be comfortable in your writing skin. So
Sure.
those people who are starting out, who are listening, it doesn't happen overnight. It's a growth that happens.
Yeah, it totally is. I remember you're making me think now, like I've had writers and people from Middlebury actually who have contacted me over the years and said, I have all these ideas. Who do you think I should meet with? Where should I go with this? And it's so funny to me, because my first thought is, well, why don't you start writing them? Why don't you write a bunch of stuff, make mistakes, write a bunch of scripts? There's this sort of feeling now, like I just have all these ideas and I want to bring them to somebody. But I really think in the end, you just got to write. You got to write. And that, I mean, on a website, there is, in some ways, there's this beautiful freedom on a website because you can try different things every single day. And you can experiment. And obviously, it's not like writing a script or writing a book. But in some ways, it's the same experience. You know, when every post you write, everything you put up there for people, you can try different stuff, and some stuff fails and some stuff succeeds, but it's the trying that really helps you grow.
Absolutely.
And on that note of if people don't know what to do with their writing or where to take it, send it to Annalisa. She is a fantastic writing coach. I was in the same boat of just like, you know, I have this idea and it's a good idea, but like I don't really know what I'm doing with my life or if I actually want to do this. And then she was basically just like, get it together. This is what you do. So in case the next person that contacts you is like, I have this idea, who should I go to? You can just forward all those calls to her. All right. Well, thank you so much, Mike, for all of this fantastic advice, especially, you know, staying authentic to yourself. I think that will resound a lot with a lot of our listeners. For all of the merchandise, hilarious photos, books, t-shirts, and everything else you can imagine, go to www.awkwardandsons.com, as well as www.awkwardfamilyphotos.com. And as always, we will include all of the links in our show notes at www.writing-gym.com/awkward. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, Mike.
You're welcome. And I would just say, first go to awkwardfamilyphotos.com. Then you can go to awkwardandsons.com. And please, we hope that people will check out the Awkward Family podcast, which is on iTunes and Stitcher and everywhere now, and a new episode coming within the next few weeks.
Awesome. We will put all of that stuff, including a link to your podcast in the show notes so that everyone can connect to it really easily.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Mike. As always, check out our show notes for links to all of the fantastic merchandise, hilarious photos, books, t-shirts, and everything else you can dream of. The show notes will be, Sorry, Tito. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mike. As always, we will include a link in our show notes to all of the amazing merchandise, hilarious photos, books, t-shirts, and everything else you can imagine. Go to www.writing-gym.com/awkward. And thank you, Annalisa, for more of your great writing advice. Annalisa is the resident writing coach in the Writing Gym. She helps writers start, finish, and bring to publication writing in all genres. And if you attended the Writer's Digest conference, you know just how fantastic she is. You know, you could publish if you only knew how. We've gotten some great advice today, writers, but look, if you love the Writing Gym podcast and if you find these tips valuable, think of how much faster your writing will get pumped into publishing shape in the Writing Gym. We take you from generating your ideas to getting them on paper, from how to find an agent to how to market your book. You'll also get the amazing opportunity to connect with other writers who will support you and give you very important quality feedback. We even have a personal trainer, me, to help keep you accountable to your writing goals. You know how you always say, I love to write, but I just can't find the time? Well, what would it be like to have a gentle guide, someone to check in with you on how you're doing on your weekly writing goals? Well, you can, and that's me. You can get the accountability you need to make the time for writing in the Writing Gym. If you're serious about pumping your writing into publishing shape, you have to apply now. Go to writing-gym.com. Thank you so much for joining us to pump up your writing here on the Writing Gym podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes and download the free cheat sheet on how to build your brand at www.writing-gym.com/awkward. Happy writing!
This has been the Writing Gym Podcast with Andy Brixey and Annalisa Parent. To join the Writing Gym, visit www.writing-gym.com.